as you said, my name is Jenna Switzer. I'm a holistic sexologist and yoga teacher trainer. So I taught yoga for about 10 years. I think we're pushing 11 now. I still have a few one-on-one clients that I work with. And throughout that time, I was always very anatomically focused in yoga. So I worked a lot in alternative yogic spaces. So we'll say like I taught in CrossFit boxes and gyms and fire stations and a lot of places where it's very focused on anatomy, biomechanics, physiology, like what's really happening in the body. And so it was through this like practice that I really got introduced to what's going on in our pelvis and what's going on in our pelvic floor. And this was a huge black hole for me. I come from a very conservative family. And so this entire area of the body was like totally taboo growing up. And we had all these like weird code names for these areas of our body. I'm sure you can relate. Like
Yeah.
it's hard when it comes to kids, but like it's so important to name those parts of your body.
Yeah.
So throughout yoga, I was really interested in mindfulness, in the anatomy, physiology, and biomechanics, as I said. And so eventually I became very, very interested in the pelvic floor, in the pelvis. And I'd always really been intrigued with the way pleasure manifests in our lives and the way different people interact with pleasure. And so I had a few really tough experiences in my intimate life. And that led me to like really go down a hole of like, how can I holistically heal these traumas? How can I use the tools that I've been taught through these yogic traditions, Tantra, Taoism, like even Buddhist, like mindfulness practices, to really heal this area of my body and create a sense of intimacy both with myself and with my partner. And so that was a really kind of powerful shift for me. And then I just felt myself more and more pulled away from like traditional yoga teaching and more towards empowering people in their pleasure. And for a while I was calling myself a pelvic floor specialist because that's what I felt like I was really doing. And nobody really understands that. So I've switched over to sex coach, and that seems to land. People seem to understand that. And I teach exactly what I've been teaching for a long time. Just like more focused on pleasure, orgasms, intimacy, how to really connect to all of those things with yourself and what we have happening on the micro level, right? So how you do one thing is how you do everything. So your ability to experience pleasure in the bedroom is a litmus test for how you're able to experience pleasure in life and vice versa. So kind of like that holistic approach to feeling good and yeah, having amazing orgasms.
I am curious if there is, one tip that you can give the ladies watching today that would help them, like right now, something they can start doing today to help them be either better receivers in the bedroom, help them achieve orgasm or pleasure more easily. What is something that viewers today can take away and start implementing now to help them?
Okay, so I'm not going to be able to stick to one. I already know.
Oh,
Like, this is going a
first
million miles a minute. Okay, so let's do three. Let's do three
three,
because
magic
I'm
number
getting
three.
straight to one. So the number one thing I would say, especially women in North America, is stop doing Kegels. So get it
Oh,
out of your head that Kegels.
wow.
Here's
Where's
another
your head? Yeah.
unpopular opinion. Because that is the really quickly, Dr. Kegel was in the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, and he came up with this exercise that was really helpful to women at the time, right? Women at the time were dealing with a very different stress level than the women today, right? You think about what was happening in the 60s and 70s, women who were going to see a gynecologist, more often than not, were stay at home women whose husbands were working and they were taking care of their children, and they were having issues after childbirth, right? So
Mm.
what he created is an activation that's super, super beneficial to recovering from pregnancy in a low stress environment. Now, we live in a high stress environment where our tissues are more tight than ever, right? What we need to learn to do, and I think anybody watching this is going to be like, she's not wrong, is relax. Like, we just need to learn how to relax. And so, what's happening is the muscles of our pelvic floor are tight because all of us are tight because we've got so much going on and our body is just maintaining tension so that we're constantly ready to do, accomplish, be. What we do when we Kegel is we contract even more. So in the same way you do like a bicep curl, right? And then eventually you kind of can't straighten your arm. Same thing with the pelvic floor. So you contract, 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 contract. Eventually you actually can't relax those tissues anymore. So number one thing I would say is don't do Kegels. And then the number two thing I would say is,
Before we go in number two, I just have to hop in here because, and again, maybe this is a negative association that comes with with, the porn industry, adult industry, whatnot. But in terms of tightness, there is an association with tightness in women's areas. So just the
Yeah,
idea of relaxing is
I know.
very
So this is
counterintuitive to
really
that.
interesting because the tension is not what gives. Oh man, there's so much to unpack. So really quickly, it's so interesting that us as women, right? It's like the reason we do Kegels is not because we think it's going to make our pleasure better. We're worried
Mm,
about the penis. That's like the penetration that's going to happen. I find
yeah.
that super interesting because I'm the exact same, right? I'm like, oh yeah, I got to be nice and tight,
Ah,
it's not going to make my orgasm better. It's because I'm thinking like that is so interesting to me.
yeah.
So the other thing is that that sensation of tightness that a partner may or may not feel actually has nothing to do with the tension of the muscles. It has to do with your ability to activate those muscles and for those muscles to contract and relax during an orgasm or during sexual intimacy of any kind. So if your tissues are chronically tight, there's no guarantee that somebody is going inside of you feeling like it's tight. To them, it could feel loose. It
Wow.
has, it's not correlated at all. Yeah, it's super interesting. Hey, I think it's the lexicon because we use the same word tight for muscles that we use for tight for our vagina, and it's not quite the same. So
Yeah.
the reason I want to tie it into number two is
Yeah.
because breathing, I think, is the most powerful tool that we have that's easily accessible, right? So we often are chest breathers. One of the things that all of us coaches are doing are trying to get people to breathe into their belly. So your entire torso is like an egg, right? And if you could imagine, this is your diaphragm, your lungs are sitting on top, diaphragm's here, pelvic floor is here. Pelvic floor are the muscles right at the bottom of your pelvis, right? So as your diaphragm goes down, your pelvic floor should relax and allow the weight of the organs to come down. Then when you exhale, your pelvic floor engages a little bit and the diaphragm goes up. So then every time you inhale, the pelvic floor should relax. Every time you exhale, it'll activate a little bit. And so this just like mindfulness practice of like breathing and trying to feel the muscles between your sit bones move as you breathe. Just that practice is really good for mindfulness, keeping your mind focused on one thing, benefits you in increasing neuromuscular proprioception, so ability to feel those muscles in your body. Plus, it'll increase blood flow and circulation, which is how we get aroused and turned on and part of our orgasmic pleasure anyway. So, that breathing practice, I think, is really important too.
And before we get into number three, I'm going to jump in here again, because again, that is so interesting. I'm like mind blown again, but it makes so much sense what you're saying. But for that one, I would say, like when I think of belly breathing or deeper breathing, I think of really bringing it down to the abdomen, let my abdomen like fill up with air. But like in the bedroom, I know a lot of us women feel very self-conscious. I don't want to let my belly hang out as I'm breathing deeply. And I feel like sometimes the chest breathing might be due to, you're trying to stay all looking all good there, in the bedroom and keeping your tummy taut as much as possible. So I guess that would be a mindset thing, I suppose. But
It
yeah,
is a mindset thing and it's tricky to overcome. And I will say that to me, that like when I think about it, that's a big hurdle, right? Overcoming self-consciousness when you're naked in the bedroom, that's a big hurdle. And so instead of tackling this huge thing that feels sometimes to be insurmountable, let's focus on the small things, right? So let's focus on increasing the amount of times in your day-to-day life that you relax your belly and you breathe in a way that feels good and relaxing. So that way, when you're in the bedroom, it's easier to drop into that style of breathing without even paying attention, right? Without thinking to yourself, like, okay, you're going to relax your belly. Here we go. Like it's because you're doing it so much on a day-to-day basis that when you're in the bedroom, it's easier. And I will also contrast that by saying, like, often if you're like super turned on, you're chest breathing because you're just like going for it and the breath tends to stay up high. So again, practicing that like deep belly breathing is going to help you stay in that more parasympathetic nervous system and be able to like experience like more intense pleasure.
interesting. What's number three?
So number three, I would say, is exactly what we were talking about, is like give yourself the opportunity to experience non-sexual pleasure.
Mm.
So we often hear the word pleasure and we're like, oh yeah, okay, orgasm, okay, sex. But pleasure, one of the practices I have almost every client that I work with do is write out a list of non-sexual pleasures. And when they are reading this list back to me or telling me the list, like the way they talk about it gives me goosebumps. Like you can just tell, that like cuddling with my dog or the sound of
Mhm.
my baby laughing or, the way my baby smells in the morning or, when my partner comes home and just holds me. And like those pleasures are part of our day-to-day life and we don't give enough energy to them. And again, if you believe how you do one thing is how you do everything, if you can really embrace those moments and really savor those non-sexual pleasurable moments, it really opens up that area of your mind to receiving and experiencing that pleasure in the bedroom.